Lord, welcome back to our broadcast, the Executive Network online broadcast. This holds every Thursday, as you already know. Thanks for joining us tonight. And if you're listening to the recording afterwards, we enjoin you to send us some feedback, some comments, so we can share your thought and also interact with you. Right, I'm going to just remind us very quickly, a very quick recap of our session last week. Now, you recall we spoke about believers' way of victory, and we emphasized that there is a certain division of labor in our walk with the Father, and that division of labor requires that we understand and appreciate what needs to be done on our part, and also understand what our Father is committed to do. So, and I'll just as a case in point, I was saying that if the Father gives an instruction, the essential part of our own requirement is to do what He says to do. The aspect of bringing it to pass, making sure that the result comes to manifestation, that is God's part. And the example that we refer to, one of the examples, was when Jesus instructed the people who lacked wine. When, remember the birthday or the wedding event that he went for, the people wanted wine. And he gave an instruction. He said, look, put some water in the big water vases or water pots. And he said, take some of that water to the chairman of the occasion. Honestly, if we're to use all of our scientific understanding as we learn science today, we would likely argue and say what you're asking us to do is irrelevant to the need of the hour. But you see, that was all they needed to do. They did as they were told, and God's own part came to manifestation. Oftentimes, maybe one of the things that prevents us from experiencing this way of victory is that we worry about what constitutes God's part of the work. We reiterated last week that we are co-laborers with God. We are walking with our Father. I mean, the picture that comes to mind is like working a family business. Let's say a family carpentry business. And there's a lot to do. Someone needs to cut or saw some wood. Someone needs to use the plane to smoothen the face of some wood. But everyone has one particular thing that they are doing, but they are working towards building some furniture. It's a joint effort. It's a collaboration. Our Father is pleased for it to be in that way. Whether the part we do is deemed small or big in our eyes is inconsequential. It's the fact that whatever the Lord assigns, that's exactly what we are authorized to do. Everything else lies within the execution of His power and preeminence, His authority. So that's the summary, quick summary of what we spoke about last week. Today, I just want to continue on that note and just bring another angle to it, which is that the victory that we've been promised in our walk with the Father is very real and very tangible. And we can experience that victory in literally every aspect of our lives, regardless of the size of the occasion, regardless of the need that we are faced with. But the key aspect to emphasize tonight is listening to the Father's voice. Listening to the Father's voice. This aspect is crucial and is so, it's something that we saw consistently in scriptures. Jesus would always say that whatever you see me do is not mine, it's not something I'm just doing on my authority. I'm walking based on the authority of my Father. Said, this is why my Father is pleased with me. I only walk based on his authority. And this is one aspect that we need to be mindful of time and again. But how can we do what he's saying without an assurance that we are actually hearing him? That is one aspect that I think we should speak into tonight. And I suggest that each time we speak to the Father, whether it's a prayer that we make a prayer, or a thought is in our heart and we're just inquiring on something, one thing or the other, I would like to suggest to us, or probably remind us, that the Father hears our voices. He listens to our thoughts. And more often than not, he reserves the right to give us instructions as he sees fit, based on the fact that the Father sees a bigger picture, bigger than we could ever imagine. So, what is important is to pay attention. Once we have spoken to him, once we have presented any matter to him, we need to pay attention. We need to expect that the Father would be speaking to us, will be responding to us, will be responding in pretty much any way that he chooses, whether that is vocal means, whether that is through various channels, whether that is also through a thought that comes to the heart. This is important because many times we may be presented with challenges and we're asking for a way out, and we may not be sure. But as long as we persist and have an expectation that the answer that we require will come from the Father, he is faithful, he is merciful, he is kind enough to respond to us. How he responds is something that we can't put a formula around. We can't say, oh, when you sleep, he will suddenly speak to you. Or whilst you are praying right there and there, he will speak to you. No, well, we can't put a formula around that. But one thing we know is that the Father, in his kindness and mercy, is more than willing to ensure that we are not walking in darkness, to ensure that we are not walking in confusion. At times, if our hearts are filled with anxiety, he may choose to use various channels, people around us. Maybe we go to an event or a meeting, and then there is a thought that is shared that speaks into the matter. Sometimes it may just be observing things around us. I mean, it literally can be anything. But one thing I want to be clear tonight about is that the Father hears and he responds. His response is driven by his inestimable love and his mercies and his kindness, all of his attributes. All of these drive his response to us. He's also, let's not forget, is a father. A father has the responsibility to sustain whatever he produces. The Bible describes God as Father. Father in the sense of someone who brings to life, or the source of life, or the origin or the foundation of life, and also someone who sustains life, someone who protects, and someone who uh, provides. All of these attributes are important when we are understanding the fatherhood of God. I am not so keen on us talking about God in the sense of is a male. The Bible never called God a male. I mean, there is no where that is written. God created man in his image. Yes, that is when the Bible uses the word man, it's talking about human beings. Then it went on to say that male and female created he them. But God never said God is the Bible never said God is a male. I have not found any such reference. So, and the reason is God is a spirit. God is not a physical being in the sense of how you would interact with another physical being, someone you can touch and feel. That's not how the Bible describes God to us. The Bible describes him as a spirit, meaning is incorporeal. It does not need a human body or a body as you have it in a human. So when we use the word father, please don't misunderstand or be offended or be triggered to think, okay, right, this patriarchy thing has come again. No, it's not in that sense. I think oftentimes misunderstanding of scripture is what brings about most of the confusion and arguments and the tussles we have. And to me, I think most of those things are simply unnecessary. Which is why we need to understand the root of the word that is used in scriptures. The Bible calls him Father. But Father does not mean, in the context of God, does not mean male in the sense. What it means is someone who is the origin of life, author of life, someone who is the foundation, the basis of life, the sustainer of life, the provider of whatever it brings to life, the sustainer of whatever it brings to life, the protector, the guarantor of whatever is brought to light or to life. And this is important. Okay, look at this again. The Bible describes God as light. Now, think about light. If you're scientific, just think about light. Light in the physical sense, or maybe in the physical sense, is pretty much waves. Or, let me not go into technical things, but the Bible does not tell us that God is flesh and blood, bones that you can touch. No. So to look at God in that sense, I start to think is it has a bias towards the male is incorrect. Is absolutely incorrect. God is father to male as well as to female alike, and there is no um, no preference. God does not love males more than he loved females. Okay, so I think I just felt like I should just talk a little on that one and move on. But the point we're making here is because he is father, he is obligated to provide and to protect. This is a key aspect of who he is. It's also the reason why we should expect him to speak to us, to respond to us, and he does. But we need to become aware of the ways in which he speaks, in the way he interacts with us. He does it in many ways. One thing I also think we shouldn't do is to put God in a box and says he only ever does it this way. We cannot formularize God. We cannot do that. It would probably create some misunderstanding. Well, that will be born of misunderstanding and may lead into errors. Nonetheless, God's voice is important for our victory. God's voice, what he says to us, is crucial to our victory. Hearing him, being able to respond to what he says. And as I said before, it might just be a thought that comes to our mind that is the answer to the question that we're facing. It might just be in a conversation. But if there's an expectation that God will speak to us and that voice of God will be the voice of victory, then we stand a better chance to recognize, to receive what he has for us. And that is fundamental for our victory. Okay, so this is something I want to say. But now look at what God was saying to students of Jesus, people who are trying to understand this way. He told them in that story that we often refer to on the mountain when he said, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him, listen to him." That is, whatever we hear from Jesus constitute God's way for man to have victory, human beings to have victory. So, if we want to understand God's foundation for life, then we should pay attention to anything that we hear from the mouth of Jesus. It says, "This is my well-beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him." That is number one and fundamental. Then, in one scripture where it was showing his commitment to coming to our aid and giving us the victory that we need for our lives, there's a statement I want to read, or a portion of scripture. And this is in Isaiah chapter 30. I'll read verses 20 and 21. It says, "Although the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, your teachers will be hidden no more. With your own eyes you will see them, whether you turn to the right or to the left. Your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." You see, to my mind, one of the greatest needs of our lives is to know what to do. Many times we get to crossroads, we get to junctions in life where we just want to know, just to have a sense of direction, a clue as to, right, this is what to do now, this is how to go about it. God is not unaware that we come to those places in life. And more than anything else, He wants to give us direction. It might well be that we've gone through difficult times, that sometimes having that sense of direction becomes even more pertinent and sometimes more difficult. But see, there is that commitment. That's why I'm emphasizing that God is committed to leading us. He is. Particularly if we take hold of that scripture that says that, look, this is my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased, hear him. If we're intent, if we're desirous of hearing him, then he's also more than willing to lead us, to show us the way to go, whether that is to the right or to the left. And of course, I'm using to the right or to the left in a descriptive sense. It does not mean literally we're turning to the right or to the left on a road. No. Sometimes it's just we want to make a decision. Sometimes we want to respond to an event. Sometimes we want to make some choices on options that are presented to us. And those options may not be binary. It may not be just one or the other. It may be quite a number of options. And we need to make a decision. There is the aspect of rational thinking, evaluating and thinking analytically. But sometimes analytical thinking is not enough. And that's where having what I would call a divine advantage is crucial. An advantage that we can derive from someone who sees further, better, clearer, and wider than we could ever do. Imagine that, say, if you're on the road, the chances are you're only seeing what's ahead, or when you turn to either side, you see what your eyes can see and you see as far as you can see. But imagine someone who has an area view of the road and the entire surrounding. That person will more than likely know what is around the corner that your eyes just can't see. That person will likely see what is in our blind spots. And this is why analytical thinking is not enough. In fact, sometimes I would even go as far to say that in every analysis, there's always a missing link. There's always something that is not thought about. No matter how many people are doing the analysis, you may have a lot of people bringing different perspectives, but there's always a perspective that sometimes we just don't see, we just don't know for whatever reason. Maybe because we are limited in experience, maybe because whatever that part of that factor is not part of our consideration at all. So analysis or experience is not enough. And even research, as great as research is, and I love doing research, I love analysis. But look, if we want to be very honest with ourselves, we know that sometimes those things are just not enough, particularly when it comes to decisions or matters that are not um, discrete in nature. We may be faced with decisions that are just very sensitive, very delicate, and it's not really big, and a lot of emotions will be involved, a lot of human angles, human factors may be involved. So it's not just being analytical, because the analysis may just be looking at the rational side of it. That may be the emotional, that may be the non-rational part. I mean, and so on and so forth. I think you know what I'm talking about. If you're dealing with a young person, maybe a child that is already growing, maybe a teenager, and everything you're saying that makes sense to you, they just don't see it that way. That's not something you can just resolve based on logic. This is where we need this divine advantage, the ability to hear from the one who sees, who knows, the one that is called omnipotent and omniscient. So look at those two. Somebody with all abilities, but then someone with all the knowledge. I mean, how advantageous will it be for your advisor to be someone who knows everything there is to be known? And I'm not talking about using AI, because AI too is limited, isn't it? AI can uh, is good in some sense, but this is not. I don't think you can parent by AI. I don't think so. At least not as far as I know. And at times, some of the options may just not be. They may not appeal to our rational thinking. Okay, wait a minute. What if the answer to the issue you've been facing is just a matter of apology, when you don't think you should be the one apologizing? I mean, think about that. Reason says you are not at fault, you shouldn't apologize, you have done nothing wrong. But what if the answer is in issuing an apology, a sincere, heartfelt apology? You see, that's why sometimes most of these things are not just rational or analytical. Analysis will tell you, no, you should demand apologies or an apology. But from the context of someone who knows and sees everything, you may need to do the exact opposite. It may even be, well, how about giving this person this little gift that you don't think is of any consequence? And that becomes the solution. So that's why we're saying there is a divine advantage, which does not mean that we should stop being analytical. No, there's a room for analysis, for logical thinking, for using the tools around us. But the question is, what should be used and when? I mean, I'm tempted to share an example. Maybe I should. Okay. This was years ago now, and I was at work. I was creating some report, using one of these BI tools. And obviously, I traveled from home to do it. And we were due to be returning back to our base location. I think this was probably Wednesday or Thursday, and would normally go back on a Friday. And we've been trying to close out this part of the work that week, which it was due to be finished that week. And between myself and my colleague, we had exhausted all of the options we knew. I mean, we'd followed online guides, online help, where our own knowledge already was exhausted. We'd tried everything we could or that we knew. And I was so frustrated that often, many times, I just went out of my chair. I just went, just want to take a walk and just try and clear your head. In fact, I had called my home office to say, you know what, I'm coming back. I'm coming back to the house, to the office. I'm tired. Because I was feeling so frustrated. But then, as I was just trying to calm down a bit, a thought came to my mind that I just said, why don't you just move just drag when you're creating a report, you have like a tabular report. And the thought just says, why don't you just drag that report a little to one side? If you ask me, from all of my knowledge, I would not, in fact, I would just dismiss that. If someone told me that, as if a physical human being told me that, I would just dismiss it. But obviously, if you're frustrated and you don't know what else to do, you probably just do some of those, in quotes, silly things. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I dragged the report, I just dragged it to the side. Lo and behold, the whole thing I've been battling with for days was resolved by something that did not make any sense to me whatsoever. Just dragging the report a bit to the left. To me, it had no bearing with what I had. The formula works well. I mean, everything had been formatted to the best of my ability, and just dragging it a little to one side. Up to now, I still don't understand what dragging that table had to do with resolving it, but it resolved it. The long and short was that by the time the project was completed, the head of the department said this is a world-class project. I mean, it answered all the questions. It was efficient. It ticked all the boxes for them. Every item that they had on their list. But this was someone who was at his wit's end, frustrated about throwing in the towel, then something that seemingly was inconsequential was the answer. Now, there may be other things that are more important than that, things that have greater significance, greater threat to people, to life, to relationships, to livelihoods. And I'm suggesting that, number one, God, because He is Father, is committed to securing the victory for us and with us. And He is more than willing to speak to us by His voice. However, how He speaks is His prerogative. Whether He brings a thought to mind, or It speaks to us through other people or through events, through occasions, or through some other dramatic means. He reserves the best option, the right option, which to speak to us. And we should expect it. And that is the other point. If there is expectation in our heart, then we're more likely to receive what he's saying to us than if we're just uninterested. We have no expectation. But you see, this is another bit. Even sometimes when we're not expected, when we're not interested, seemingly, God in mercy still does things that, seemingly we just don't deserve. But I think it's better if we are, or it would be better if we are in expectation that he, in his kindness, he will speak to us. Sometimes God withholds answers because we're just not ready to receive them. Imagine that as I was trying to create that report, right at the outset, 2 days before, a thought had come to me to just move it to the right side and that would have solved it. I would certainly have ignored it because I was still working with my, trying to work based on my training. My training says do this, write the formula this way, and then format it this way. Moving a report table to the right would not, or to the left, would not have come to, even if it came to mind, I would, in all likelihood, I might have simply ignored it. So when we think God is too late, maybe he is just on time. And that's why we need to listen to him. Sometimes, you see, sometimes, I want to say this carefully. Unless we are so sure that we have heard God's voice, I would suggest that we maintain a certain kind of flexibility, a certain kind of adaptability. Because sometimes we may be so insistent on the way we want to do things that when God is showing us a way to go, we would argue, ignore it, and say, no, that's not what to do. We would even argue with God and say, no, God, I'm not doing that. So, I would say that it's an advantage to maintain a malleable, teachable mindset, adaptable mindset. And then sometimes the situation may warrant being insistent to say, look, we need to commit to this way. But see, question is, which is right? There is no formula to it. That's why we need that advantage to hear his voice. Our way of victory requires being able to hear his voice. I will wrap up with the words of Jesus. Jesus says, I do nothing on my own authority. What I hear the Father say, that's what I say. What I see my Father do, that's what I do. So that's why my Father loves me. And I like the way one of my mentors said it. He said, not that we can, should we. That is, ability does not automatically translate to authority. That we can does not mean we should. That's important. Ability is not the same as authority. Ability is power, but authority is legitimacy, is credibility, is permission. Or is license. And this is important. Well, I think we will stop it there. And I hope this has been useful. But I know that, I mean, just if you're like me in any way at all, there are many times that we're faced with situations where we need to make a decision and we just don't know what to do. But I hope this comes as an encouragement that our Father is interested in those situations. He wants to help us, He wants to give us clarity, He wants to give us direction, He wants to lead us to victory. Whatever victory means, He wants to do that. And it's because He is Father. He is Father. And we didn't ask to be born by Him. He chose to give birth to us. Just like your children didn't ask you to bring them to the world. Yeah, I mean, you know what you did. So, well, and it's the same thing with our Father. He chose to bring us to the world. And because His Father is committed to whatever He produced, He's committed enough to sustain it, to provide for it, to bring help and succor to it, and trust Him for that. Well, let's wrap up there. Thanks for joining us. And whenever you listen and you wish to share a comment, please do so through our various channels. And we look forward to being with you same time next week. God bless you. Have a good night.